Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. And we are really excited today. We have a screenwriter, Russell Hainline, here with us for the third time. Welcome back. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So glad to be here.
Yeah. I mean, it was so fun because the first year you kind of had like this underdog hit, and we really enjoyed it in Merry Measure. And then second year, you had, this big hit with the Santa Summit, and we had you on No Sophomore Slump. And now this year, you're just taking over the world. It's so exciting.
It's been a great year. I'm very fortunate. Again, a lot of really cool people at Hallmark believe in me. A lot of talented people. Obviously, the actors that I've gotten to work with this year, other writers have gotten to work with. I mean,
Yeah.
so many great people have liked what I've done, and luckily, I get to keep working. I get to keep doing
Yeah.
the thing that I really love.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you feel about being kind of firmly entrenched in this sort of Hallmark Christmas movie world?
I feel like I feel like you're never firmly entrenched. I feel like the idea that, once you get in the door, you're there doesn't feel like that, honestly. It doesn't feel real.
Hmm.
It feels like you're always or let me say not you feel like I feel like this is clearly a me thing, and I feel like maybe most writers would agree with me on this. You always suspect that you're one or two bad scripts or bad movies away from colossal failure and just abject humiliation on a public forum, right? So
Yeah.
I feel very motivated to continue to do good work. I really want my movies to have the thing where audiences who know Hallmark movies and who know Netflix Christmas movies or whatever, that if they see my name attached, they're going to go, oh, this is going to be one of the good ones,
Yeah.
right? I really want my name to be like Julie, like Nina, like the best writers that Hallmark has that work every year and are prolific. I would love to be prolific as well, but I think you only become prolific by continuing to do great work over and over
Hmm.
again.
Yeah.
So
But
hopefully,
you're like a real movie fan. I mean, I see your letterbox, I see what you're watching.
I've got
And yeah.
my physical media back here.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Very important.
Yeah. So that must just be like a very cool thing to be like, I actually wrote like being a movie fan that you've
Yeah.
written movies. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. What can you say? I mean, it beats working for a living.
Yeah. Beats
I,
digging
yeah,
ditches.
it's insanely hard work. I've been working harder. I mean, I'm exhausted right now. I probably
Yeah.
look compared to like 2 years ago when we spoke, I probably look far more tired because I am. But, I think it's a privilege. And I always tell people I didn't move to LA to sit on my hands. I came here to work. I've
Yeah.
got more things cooking for
Yeah.
2025, knock on wood, they go all the way through. And again, at a time when the industry is struggling and at a time when I think it's really hard for writers to get consistent work, I'm very fortunate that I am currently, at least as of December 2024, getting consistent work. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're getting used to getting tired with new baby.
sure, yeah. Uh, yes, being a family
Yeah.
man is exhausting, but
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah. Well, congrats on everything. I'm so excited for you. And you have four projects this year. Is that right?
Four. I had three
Yeah.
for Hallmark and one for Netflix. That's right.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Hot Frosty first. So the Netflix project.
Yeah.
Now, how did this all happen? Like what tell me the backstory. Tell me how this came to be.
I thought it was a funny idea. I don't know whether the title came to me first or the idea. It's a real chicken or the egg situation there,
Uh-huh.
but I knew that the title Hot Frosty was funny. That made me laugh. It still makes me laugh. Makes
Yeah.
me laugh anytime I see anybody using it. And I knew the idea of what if when Frosty the Snowman came to life, he was a super hot dude. I also thought that was funny.
Yeah.
And then it came down to, well, okay, I think it's a funny idea. I think it could be a movie. I think there's a movie here. What kind of movie would I want to watch? I didn't want it to be sort of a one note thing. I didn't want it to be let's all laugh at how stupid this idea is. You know, tongue-in-cheek the entire way at the expense of characters. I didn't want that. But I also didn't really want like the romance novel version that didn't really have a lot of fun and find a lot of the humor in the scenario. So I, instead of shopping it around as a pitch, I wrote it on spec. I just wrote it myself, not really thinking anyone would ever make it. But then that way, when I would tell people about my movie Hot Frosty, it wouldn't just be an idea, it'd be a real thing and they
Mm-hmm.
could read it. And that's how I got into the hands of the good people at Muse. They optioned it 2 years ago now, like a while ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's been a minute. Maybe it's probably been 2 years. And so they shopped it around for a long time, tried to find a home for it for a long time, and it made it into the right hands at Netflix. I found out, towards the beginning of this year that one of the executives at Netflix was really like going to bat for it. And that's a great feeling when like,
Yeah.
Netflix was always where this project probably belonged. It's just not really TVG enough to be a Hallmark. And it obviously benefits from the bigger budget that a Netflix movie would provide. So it made it where it belonged. It got the cast that it always sort of was screaming to get, and a great director in Jerry. The producers are great. I mean, again, just top to bottom, an absolute dream, a dream team, as it were.
Yeah. So how much did you think about the mechanics of this snowman? Like the scarf and what is exactly like how does the scarf work?
Uh, you know, I don't want to like. I'll put it this way. I think that in movies like this, Christmas magic is just kind of a catch-all. It is.
Mm-hmm.
But also, whenever I watch a movie like this, I'm not terribly interested in the mechanism of how a scenario occurs. I'm far more interested in like, well, how do people respond to something instead
Mm-hmm.
of, unpacking the past of how something came into existence, unpacking now that it is in existence, where will it go? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there are things that I would have included in a longer version of the movie that I'll keep to myself in case they're
Oh, okay.
cool. Which I would love there to be. I don't know if there will be. That's me completely putting it out into the world and dreaming, right? But
Uh-huh.
yeah, I think that generally speaking, I love the idea that at Christmas things are a little more magical and there are good things that will happen to good people and a good community will lift
Mm.
up somebody in need and sort of all the things that you think about with the season.
Well, yeah, I mean, because this thing, like whoever it is that's a snowman maker, that they are they the scarf maker? I mean, my mind just went all kinds of directions, so I'll overthink it, of course. But I just like,
Sure.
does he know that his thing has come to life? Like, is he aware?
He knows
The
oh, you mean
snowman
the
maker?
snowman maker.
Yeah.
You know,
We just
again,
got to see like my sculpture is walking around. Like, it's very fun.
again, I have some thoughts that I'd want to keep to myself on that, but more than anything, this is Jack's story,
Uh-huh.
Kathy's story, and I'm
Yeah.
I'm far less interested, at least for this particular story. I really wanted there to be a focus on Kathy and Jack, and then a focus on obviously the sheriff story and how the sheriff
Yeah.
interacts with the community and the
Mm.
sheriff's response to Jack and how it contrasts with the community's response to Jack. So
Mm-hmm.
I think including something about, like a person being like, am I a god? Did
Yeah.
that's another movie. We're saving that for something else. We'll leave that there.
Yeah, I
I
get
want
that. I
to
get that.
overcomplicate. That's like if
Is
I had like a 2.5 hour movie, then I could play a lot more. But
yeah.
in the time I have, I really wanted to sort of streamline it.
And maybe in the Hot Frosty miniseries, we'll get the prequel, the
Hey,
backstory.
green light it, Netflix. Let's go.
Yeah, let's do it.
The
Yeah.
HFU, the Hot Frosty universe. Let's do it.
Yeah. Was it hard to come up with the ending though that would be satisfying because you have this snowman and I mean, was it hard to figure out, okay, what do we do? To
Yeah. I mean, in the original version, I don't even know if I want to like totally, because again, I don't know what I want to save just in case. but there were versions in which he did not turn into a person,
Hmm.
in which he survived, and like, just like moved to the North Pole, or like the highest
Oh,
northern areas of Alaska, right? Somewhere where he could sustain more, but he still then wouldn't really be a person. He still, put it this way, the continuation of the journey that would go on after the movie has ended would be less about learning what it means to be a full flesh and blood human being, and would continue to sort of be about the same thing that he's been going through, right? Like, I'm still very different from people, but I'm trying to live the way that people live. Uh,
right. Yeah.
so I thought the idea of him becoming a person at the end, again through, the old
Magic.
Christmas magic, uh, was something that would at least put us in a satisfying ending situation, and B, again, if I wanted to continue this story in any way, it then becomes, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities from there,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, you must have been thrilled with the response. I mean, everyone's talking about Hot Frosty. It's the Hallmark movie that's not the Hallmark movie that everyone's talking about this year.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely thrilled. I had no idea. I mean, you never know.
Yeah.
It's always scary, especially with Netflix. Netflix is just so much bigger than Hallmark in terms of its reach.
Right.
People who watch a Hallmark movie generally know they're watching a Hallmark movie. So you get a bit of grace from the people who tune in, right? They know
Hmm.
what they want to see, and you have to find ways of giving them what they want to see while also expanding the sandbox a little bit. But again, there's some kindness in the response there. Netflix, casual people who have no interest in watching Christmas movies are going to watch your Christmas movie. And
Yeah.
how are they going to respond to it? And it's going to get reviewed in the Times or whatever, right? There's just big, big stuff going on
Hmm.
as a result of that jump from Hallmark to Netflix. And that was
Yeah.
very, very scary. I was terrified, but then obviously incredibly grateful that the critics were very kind to it. People seemed to get what I was trying to accomplish, what the whole team was trying to accomplish. And again, I would love to make more for Netflix. I had a really, really positive experience there. And whether it's a Hot Frosty
Hmm.
sequel, whether it's something else, whether it's both,
Right.
it was really cool. It'd be nice to
Hmm.
sort of take some of the stories that I think are akin to Hallmark Christmas stories, Hallmark holiday stories, but
Hmm.
that probably require a longer shoot, require a bit more money, require whatever, right? More effects.
Hmm.
It would be cool to have another avenue for those stories. I
Yeah.
think that would be great.
Is it hard writing kind of broad comedy and having like, I would think it would be hard to have confidence in the jokes, that because you just hear them over and over and you go through them over and over again and being like, no, this actually is funny, like having confidence in your jokes. I think that would be hard.
I think that's honestly maybe the least hard part.
Ah, okay.
Because at the end of the day, all I can do is write something that I think is funny. And so
Yeah.
if I'm amused by it, if I'm tickled by it, then the odds are I will remain amused by it and tickled by it. Like, my wife definitely gives me grief about, what, when I'm working on my draft, she'll like hear me laughing at like what I'm writing, right? At my own stuff.
Yeah.
When we're watching a movie that I have written, again, I will laugh at jokes that I have done, but that's the goal, right? The
Yeah.
goal is, I don't know what Rachel is going to think is funny at any given beat of a story, but I know what I will think is funny. And so I can make that. And then I can just hope that everybody is as amused as I am. And luckily, it's mostly gone okay so far.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the harder part is figuring out how to push the comedy without losing the heart. I think that trying to find that nice balance where, yes, it's very silly, but also we care.
Hmm.
I think that balance can be tricky. There were jokes that I loved that I knew would work that I had to cut, because you have to end up servicing the story and the characters first and foremost. And so you have to kill your darlings, as they say,
Yeah.
in order to try to strike that balance. And it's up to the
Mhm.
audience to determine whether I
Yeah.
actually did it or not. But again, I'm grateful that so many people seem to have really enjoyed it.
Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
What was your inspiration? Did you have any like that you just said you just thought it was funny, but did you have anything else that kind of gave you the idea for Hot Frosty?
Not really. I mean, it really just sort of boiled down to funny concept. Now, how do we make it real? I mean, that's kind of the same thing with Santa Summit. It's the same thing with some
Mhm.
of the things in Wiser Men and certainly in Santa Claus coming out this weekend. I don't know when this drops. Maybe it's already
Yeah.
come out. But that's another one where the idea is very silly. Okay. So once you have the silly idea, how do you make characters you care about? That's really how I like to operate. I think The Guardian said about Hot Frosty, maybe I'm misparaphrasing, but something like it's sincerely stupid, but it goes about it sincerely. And I thought that
Yeah.
was great. That's kind of what I
Yeah.
love. I love silly
Yeah.
comedy and I love sincerity. So
Mhm.
that's definitely my
Yeah.
genre.
Well, the fish out of water elements I've always really enjoyed that kind of comedy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's like Encino Man or
Sure.
Enchanted or Elf or whatever it might be. Like that's just fun.
Absolutely. I love misfits just in general.
Hmm.
Santa Claus is another big misfit story coming up.
Yeah.
Wiserman, the kids are all kind of misfits at the school. In Merry Measure certainly had that. So yeah, it's a genre that I gravitate towards and that I keep going back to. I don't know what that says about me. A psychiatrist can unpack that, but
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk about Three Wiser Men and a Boy.
sure.
So hot take. I actually like this better than the first one.
Great.
I know. Hey,
I think that's not like a super spicy take. I've heard some people say that,
well, the reason why is because it not being Andrew's baby made absolutely no sense in the first movie. Like it made no sense that he wasn't the dad. And like they were just so afraid to have a character of theirs have a child, I guess out of wedlock. They couldn't handle it in Hallmark. And but like it just made no sense that she would leave the baby like just this random person like and that they wouldn't immediately turn the baby to the social services that they would like if it wasn't his baby like it made no sense. And so like this one I think was much better because I didn't have that story block.
you've moved past the
I'm
things about the premise that you did not care for.
I mean I really enjoyed the first one. I give it a very high score. So but
Sure.
I'm just saying I like this better because I didn't have that story block.
I think that one of the good things about sequels when they're done right, and we worked very, very hard to try to make this one done right, is you don't have the burden that the first one does of you have to let the audience get to know these characters. Like you
Yeah.
have to establish. And then in the second one, ideally what you can do is go, okay, the characters are established. Now let's have fun with them. Let's give them more to do beyond the establishment, which will then help the audience get to know them, a little bit more on a deeper level. But you don't have to go through and do like, well, what makes these guys tick? What are their personalities? What have
Yeah.
they been through? We know all of that going into this one. So then we can kind of get straight to the fun, which I love.
Yeah. Well, and it's nice too because you don't have to worry about some like strange conflict for our couple in a typical rom-com. Most rom-com sequels are absolutely terrible, and that's
Sure.
because they just don't know what to do with the couple next. It's very difficult.
That can be hard. That can definitely be hard.
And this was about the brothers, so you
It
didn't have
is
that
mostly
same.
about the brothers. I would like to think that Santa Summit 2, if we ever got to make it, I've pitched it, and I
Mm-hmm.
would like to think that it's got, similar vibes to it, right? Where, yeah, you do have to find some new conflicts. Obviously, Susie and Stefan have a conflict in this, but it's not the central thrust of the movie. The central
Yeah.
thrust of the movie is what it's always been. It's the family.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree. I think when your central thrust, it's the same problem with sitcoms, right? Once Pam and Jim get together, well, what can we do? We're not just going to watch them be happy forever. Like
Right.
what's the conflict? Like what's going on? We can't just vibe out with Pam and Jim for the next several seasons. So then they got to bicker about this or bicker about this or go through this hardship. Yeah, I agree. I also think that it's true to life. I do think that after you get together with somebody, then real life problems really start settling in, and the things that you thought would just sort of work themselves out as the gears of life turn uh,
Yeah.
don't always go that way. That's obviously a bit of the Susie and Steph thing in this. So yeah, it makes for a tough viewing experience, and it certainly makes it harder to find that same level of satisfaction to the first chapter of a thing. I agree with
Yeah.
that
I
generally.
mean, you watch these movies for escapism. You don't want to watch them for gritty realism.
Sure, you don't want to watch them like, oh, the tax man said we need
Yeah.
everything audited, and yeah, sure, absolutely.
Because a lot of times with Hallmark sequels, they either have them break up and then just repeat everything that happened in the first movie
Sure.
again, which usually is kind of frustrating. You don't want to break up. Or they have them plan a wedding, which is also not my favorite. So it's just tough. It's tough. But this, because it was more of an ensemble piece, it had just so much more to work with, I feel
Yeah.
like. And I'm sure it was very challenging, as you said, but I just appreciated that we got to know these brothers and really focused on their relationship and their relationship with their mom
Yeah.
more.
I'll also say if the Santa Summit sequel happens, it will not be about a breakup and it will not be about planning a wedding.
Okay,
So
thank
just
you.
just so you know. Yeah, I agree. I agree with all of that. I think that it was a lot of pressure, is what it was. I'm sure Paul
Sure.
and Kim felt the pressure as well. I felt the pressure. I don't want to say more than Paul and Kim because they obviously it's their baby, right? I'm sure
Hmm.
that they felt an exorbitant amount of pressure, but then I felt the added pressure of, it's their baby. Like I'm
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
caring for their baby for, portions. I'm helping raise, the
Sure, yeah.
baby in this next step, but they've established all this stuff. So first and foremost, I really wanted Paul and Kim to be happy with the work that I was doing because I figured if they're happy with it, then the movie's going to turn out really well, and obviously secondary to that, but maybe equally important, is the fans. The fans love the Brenner boys. You don't
Hmm.
want to create a
Yeah.
situation in which they feel like it's not true to the boys that they knew from the first movie. So, in a perfect world, the job that I'm trying to do, that I tried to do, is the jokes that I added, the structural stuff that I brought to the table. If you can't tell which stuff is mine and which stuff is Paul and Kim's and which stuff is stuff that Paul and Andrew and Tyler were sort of riffing on the day, like if you can't tell any of those things, then I think I've done a good job, and I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that Paul and Kim have done a good job, and that the crew, while they were there that day
Mhm.
riffing, did a great job. So
Were you brought on pretty early on into the process? Or
I was
is it
brought on later for
late?
sure.
Okay.
Because Paul and Kim, I was basically given a script that Paul and Kim had done and had been working on, and it was very funny, and it had a lot of the things that you want in it. But I think that when a movie like this, you've got so much going on, right? Each brother has their individual arc, right, of what they're going through. Some of them also have, love interest stuff going alongside their own individual arc. So right away, right, that's like 5 things right there. That doesn't include the boy. Now that's 6 things. That doesn't include the mom and Pastor Roy. Now that's
Yeah.
7 things. That doesn't include the mounting of the play and that being sort of a device to get everybody together. Now that's 8 things. There's so much, and it's 83 minutes long. There's so much going on.
Yeah.
And so they had so many funny things and so much happening. But I think um, one of the reasons why I was brought in was because people saw Santa Summit, or at least this is what I was told. Is people saw Santa Summit and they're like, oh, this guy had a lot of stuff going on in Santa Summit, but the structure of it seemed pretty tight, seemed put together. Maybe if we bring another voice into this situation, we can have some additional, structure thoughts. He can bring some jokes to the table, character stuff to the table. So I did a pass. I did, I added some things. I structured some things. I did, and then I gave it back to Paul and Kim and to the crew. And again, it was very cool seeing some of my stuff on screen, but even cooler was that there were jokes where I was like, was that my joke or was it not? Like, I
Yeah. Yeah.
don't know. I can't tell. And that's again, that tells me if I'm thinking that hopefully I've done my job and
Yeah.
hopefully, and I know that Paul and Kim are very happy with how the movie came out. So
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't tell, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, the whole thing with the play, I'm a theater person, so I loved everything with that. That was so fun and funny.
a lot of people assumed that the play was me. The play was definitely Paul and Kim. That was in what
Okay.
from the very beginning. That was them. The dramatic drama teacher. Again, something that I really love. I'm sure that I added a joke or two in there, but like everything about him was there from the beginning. Which again made it easy for me
Yeah.
because that's also my world, right? So
What
that's a fun world to get to play.
what about Mark Leclerc?
What about Mark Leclerc?
Who's responsible for Mark Leclerc? Because I would want a whole Mark Leclerc spinoff if it was up to me. I thought Matt Hamilton was absolutely hilarious. He stole the movie for me. I thought he
I
was really
I
funny.
told Matt I will write endless amounts of lines for Mark Leclerc. When I took the job, one of the first things I said was, "Well, we got to bring." I hadn't read the script yet. I was like, "Well, we're
Okay.
bringing Mark back, right? We're bringing back Mark Leclerc." They're like, "Oh yeah, Mark's in there." So that felt great.
Yeah. It was
Yeah,
so
I
funny, I thought.
wrote an abundance of jokes for him. If they do an extended like version like they did with the first one, I would be very surprised if there's not more Mark Leclerc in there. There a couple of my favorite jokes of Mark Leclerc's that I put in there did not make it into the final thing. I think maybe they would make it into the extended cut because they definitely filmed them. They just ended up on the cutting room floor. Uh, he's a joy to write for,
Yeah.
and Matt's a cool guy. There are 1 or 2 jokes in there I would say probably that like my best friends would probably know were mine.
Uh-huh.
Um, but again, it was the smallest possible number. I
Yeah.
mean, it was just really really fun to get to.
Yeah. Well, you're all in here talking your feelings and hey losers. Like that was just so funny to me.
Yeah,
I
that
really
I don't know that that was me. That was I think a lot of the maybe not a lot, but some of the things when he's going through like the silly stuff that he's adding to the play or whatever. Like I do think I added some of
yeah.
that. Um, you know, there were it's just it's really hard to not want to just keep writing Mark Leclerc jokes over and
Yeah.
over and over. Like the movie has to proceed.
Right.
And like unfortunately. So I don't know. Mark
Yeah.
Leclerc Hallmark Plus spinoff. Call me.
Yes.
I'd do it in a
Oh my
heartbeat.
gosh. I
Let's
would,
go,
yes,
you
let's
know.
do it. Was it tricky the dynamic with Pastor Roy and keeping our boys likable enough and
Yes.
in that
Yes.
conflict? Yeah.
Easy answer is yes.
Hmm.
I was concerned at times, just in what I was doing, and I know that those conversations took place a lot. Um, but again, Pastor Roy was in from Paul and Kim's story right from the beginning.
Hmm.
The boys sort of having their feathers ruffled by the presence of a boyfriend in their mom's life, and sort of viewing their mom as their mom and not as a person, who might
Mm-hmm.
want a romantic interest. I mean, that was there from the beginning. Uh, I think that it helped that they got a really good actor to play Pastor Roy. I do think that most of like the rougher edge stuff that maybe could have been in there at one point or another from me or from anybody, it seems like most of it got sanded down, which I think is a good thing. I was definitely a little concerned that Pastor Roy would but then I also read some reviews online where people were like, they weren't mean enough. Pastor Roy is really injecting himself into their Christmas traditions and he needs to chill out. So who knows? Every person's
Yeah.
tolerance is different for those sorts of things. But I,
Mm-hmm.
I think the end result struck a really nice balance and the people who
Mm-hmm.
shot it and cut it together and obviously the actors
Yeah.
did a phenomenal job.
I like Pastor Roy.
Yeah.
It made sense. Like most of his he was it was reasonable that he's just
Yeah.
trying to like help with the play and help with his girlfriend and just trying
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I liked
I,
it.
I
So
don't I don't remember who put in all the jokes about him being good with his hands. That sounds like something that I would have done, but it
yeah.
also sounds like something Paul and Kim would have done.
Yeah.
So, but I loved that it didn't just come up once, that then it came up again. And I know for a fact because I definitely did not write the scene where they talked to the principal at the school. So the principal knowing that Pastor Roy's good at his hands was definitely a riff off of, whatever was in earlier.
Yeah.
Did not do that. So whoever wrote it knew it was
Yeah.
funny. Like everybody knew it was funny, and they're like, let's keep adding the good
Yeah.
stuff in there, right? Like, and I've talked with Paul and Kim. They obviously worked on Santa Claus with me. Best joke wins. I mean, just
Hmm.
period.
Yeah.
Everybody looks better when best joke wins. So again,
I
I'm
always say funny saves all.
funny saves all.
Yeah.
I'm always delighted when I can't tell who wrote a joke. And if my name is on as a writer in any capacity and the end result is funny, then it's a good reflection upon
Hmm.
me whether I wrote the
Yeah.
joke or not,
Yeah. 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 When I talked to Paul, I asked him about because one of the things I think is interesting about the movie is that you have all these different forms of masculinity, all these
Sure.
different men portrayed.
Yeah.
And I mean that you have somebody, Mark Leclerc, because they're alpha, you've got Pastor Roy, you've got all these different types of men. And for a genre that is primarily women and women focused, I think is kind of interesting. It makes it unique.
Yeah, for sure. I think that you're hitting the nail on the head. It's obviously something that I mean, Hot Frosty obviously deals with masculinity and, some of the hang-ups of it, and what have you as well. I mean, it's something that I find very interesting personally.
Yeah,
I certainly think it's something that audiences, in the same way that, over the past few years, right, in sort of the regime shift, it stopped being, well, like, what a big city woman does is goes back to her hometown and finds, a nice baker to settle down with or whatever. I think the women characters in movies in the last few years have such a broader range of things to play, right? Like the sorts
yeah,
of female characters are so um diverse and so specific, and having that wide range, I think, is really interesting and fascinating. And certainly for male characters, again, in a world where the traditional thought that people think is sort of a burly guy with a flannel shirt who, is chopping wood or whatever,
yeah,
right? Like to bring in some different types of dudes into these movies,
yeah.
and show that they all can be appealing as long as their heart is in the right place and as long as they look like Andrew, Paul, and Tyler, then
Yeah, right.
then
Yeah,
that
because there's
helps a
still
great
like
deal.
the hunky moments. There's still all the like escapism part of it that you
Yeah,
want. But yeah, so I
yeah.
appreciated that.
I loved that with Andrew's character, we got to show, like even studs start to get old.
Yeah.
Studs get old.
And
You
him
know,
trying to be a good dad and everything.
Yeah,
Very, yeah.
you get worn down, like once you cross a certain age, your back
Mhm.
hurts, your knees
Yeah.
hurt, that's
Yeah.
it doesn't matter whether you're totally ripped and super handsome, like you are still subject to the same pitfalls as that. Like Father Time is undefeated,
Yeah.
so
That's
I
true.
thought that was a fun thing to get to have some fun with, not
Yeah.
get too serious with, but to have some fun with. And again, in the extended cut, there's definitely more stuff at the firehouse with Andrew's character that I think would be really cool if we got to see, but we'll see. We'll see. I don't know if they'll do that or not.
Yeah, maybe.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, Hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
So speaking of this, the city girl going back to the country, so you had Christmas
Sure.
Under Lights,
Yeah.
which that was in the basic framework of it was that was it. It was a classic Hallmark story. So was that sort of fun for you to kind of like see what you could do with that trope?
It was really challenging. I mean,
Mhm.
I came on and the premise was basically all that was there. It was like, we'd like to do something with an alpaca farm and let's go with this. And I knew it was going to be in the Miracles of Christmas series, so they
Okay.
wanted something that was going to skew more traditional, and that was very scary to me because I hadn't really done anything like that, and I wasn't sure that I wanted to do it. But ultimately, I think that once you encounter something where you're like, I'm not sure if I want to do this, it's kind of a good sign that you should probably
Yeah.
do it just to see.
Well, it made me laugh
Yeah.
that like I just felt like it was kind of funny that like the compromise was we'll just send her to Seattle. That's like an okay city. LA is awful. Like LA's bad. She lost her soul. And then but we can find this happy medium in Seattle. I
Yeah,
thought that was kind of funny.
I think that I've ended up writing stuff kind of like this and a number of things, including something that I'm working on right now for a Hallmark. I'm really interested in this idea of when you, in today's world, we are inundated with quote unquote content. We are inundated with news. We are inundated with everything. How today can you make something that separates from the pack, that stands out, that creates a quote unquote legacy, that makes, your name and your business mean something? Certainly, I feel this way, obviously, because I work in an industry where there are hundreds of Christmas movies and movies, whether they're made on Hallmark or other channels, that are this type of movie. There are hundreds of them every year. So how do I make good ones? How do I make like the ones that will last and that people will want to come back to? Is it even possible today to do something like that? That's something that's very much on my mind. So I don't even know if Heather's character, if Emily lost her soul, more like she doesn't know what she's accomplishing there anymore. And, when she throws a big party and it's the biggest hit party in LA, the next day there's going to be another hit party that's the biggest hit party in LA. And then next week there'll be another one. So is that enough? And I don't remember if it ended up in the movie or not, but, I think that this thing also parallels what she's going through with her mom a little bit in that, once something that I have made is gone, does that mean it no longer has value? Right? Does that mean it's actually gone? If I threw an epic event in LA and people just remember it and they're kind of like, "Hey, you remember that thing? Like that was fun, wasn't it?" Is that enough? Like is that justification for all of the effort that went into it, or does there need to be more there? And as time passes, everything will fade, but also some of those memories will linger. It's like Marco's character gives the speech about how like things that are gone aren't actually gone.
Yeah.
And I believe that with my work. I believe that in life and love and everything else. So
well, LA is the perfect place to pick because
yeah,
it's all about what is trendy and new.
Yeah.
Like there is, of course, a legacy and a tradition and a heritage and everything in LA, but like it's just an
It's really
easy,
hard.
if you want to pigeonhole a place as being like, as being vapid, for lack of a better word, that, oh, well, LA, and then,
Sure.
these other cities are good. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
don't get me wrong. LA is my home. I love LA.
Right. Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
a huge, huge fan of LA, but it definitely
But it just
comes
doesn't
with
have like that obvious sort of legacy of like some place like a Santa Fe or a place like that, or like, you know what I mean, where there's like this, aside from the movies themselves, that's like the
sure.
biggest kind of cultural identification of Los Angeles,
I
and
do think
so
I do think people associate LA with a certain degree of shallowness.
yeah.
I do think that's true. That has not been my experience in LA, but
Right.
I also know that the audience will associate that
As
more
a
than anything
storytelling
else.
tool.
It's a
Yeah.
storytelling tool
Yeah.
for sure. It's also, again, look, as someone who lives in LA and has a lot of the same worries that Emily has in Christmas Under the Lights, it just, well, why would I set her anywhere else to start,
Yeah.
And I wanted her
Yeah.
somewhere that was far from her home. And I wanted to make sure the two things that I wanted to do to try to flip this were, one, she wasn't going to stay in LA, but she was not going to go to a hometown. There's no
Yeah.
but also I didn't want the small town guy who she talks to. He's not a small town guy in this. He's a city guy. He's a very
Mhm.
urbane guy
Yeah.
who is just enjoying reveling in sort of nature and the farm life, the ranch life.
Yeah.
But he's not that guy really, he's somebody who also probably needs to move on with his life and go somewhere and find somewhere where he can plant his flag and start again. That is not the place that he sort of fell out of love with, whether it was his choice or not. So I always sort of had the idea they're going to move to a new place. It'll still be a very urban place. I wanted it to be very clear to the audience that, like, moving to an urban city is very cool and good. Like, I think it is a great thing to do.
Yeah.
You don't just need to move to your hometown. I would be terrified to move back to my hometown, not because I don't love the people there, but because that part of my life is behind me. I don't
Yeah.
need to go back to that. Like, I'm moving forward.
Well, that's why I thought it was clever to have this like middle ground of Seattle.
Sure.
It was
Yeah.
good. It was
I
clever.
also really love Seattle. I think Seattle's cool.
Yeah.
It's going to be a culture shock for Emily, but the sheer amount of rain going from LA to Seattle
Yeah.
is a total 180. But
I've never been to Seattle. I have been to Los Angeles many times, and I do actually really enjoy it there. But
yeah,
it's just it's I get it for the storytelling purposes. It works really
sure.
well. Yeah, it works really
Absolutely.
well.
And I think Hallmark audiences,
Yeah.
understand that, big city in general is a place where you can get lost, where you
Yeah.
can devote yourself not to self-betterment like internally, but externally.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a bevy of opportunities in a big city to better yourself externally, which I think
Mhm.
is really, really cool and good and valuable also, as long as you're not like as long as you're still caring for the internal
Yeah.
part as well.
Right. Well, so you have the Santa class. I'm not sure when I'm going to post this, so it might be just
Okay.
after it posts. But regardless, like, why don't you tell us a little bit about this movie and what's going on?
This movie is so much fun. This is one that I am over the moon exists. It's one of those where it's like, how did this completely crazy thing get made on Hallmark? I think it's really, really cool. It's about a school for shopping mall Santas. That Kimberly Sustad's character, she sort of inherits leadership there. She's never wanted to be the leader there. She's always wanted to do something else, but has never really found her calling. And she's kind of in the same way that, much like Christmas Under the Lights and some other things, she's a little, what's the word I'm looking for? She's not pleased that she's still at this place. It's not her calling. But it's her dad's legacy, it's her dad's creation. And they, at one point, were like the name in shopping mall Santa training, and now they are kind of on the downswing. They are more the misfit school for Santas, and now there is a like private school, like rich kid, perfect
Ooh,
Santa shopping mall Santa
the
school.
rival school, right?
Absolutely. It's very
Yeah.
much in that sort of camp movie spirit, that ultimately the misfit school, the misfit camp, what have you, and the rich kid, private school, they're going to have a competition.
Oh
We're
my
going to root
gosh.
for our misfits. And then on top of all of that, we have that on the way to the first day of the school, Kimberly and Ben Ayers' characters encounter a man with amnesia, dressed like Santa, walking along the street. And they very quickly realize, oh, this dude is the real Santa.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So, how do you convince Santa that you can't just be like, "Hey, dude, you're Santa," because he's not going to believe you. Nobody would, you know. So, how can they move all of their students towards victory in the Christmas
Yeah.
competition while also trying to put Santa through the school process in hopes of jogging his memory and reminding him who he is?
Yeah, because they have to get it before or no Christmas.
They got to get it before Christmas or no Christmas.
Yeah.
There's a lot at stake. And obviously, all of this creates so many opportunities for fun. The supporting cast, I
Yeah.
think, is absolutely delightful. So many fun, like, surprises in terms of characters that you would not expect to be students at a Santa school. Um, there's a lot of like little twists and turns in there. I think the romance between Kim and Ben, I don't think it's a spoiler that it's
Sure.
the two of them are going to have a bit of a, enemies to lovers turn in here, but like I think the chemistry between them is really strong.
So is he
Really.
running the other school
But
or
I don't know what I should
oh, okay,
reveal in
okay.
terms of his backstory in case this drops before Saturday,
Oh, sure.
but as we see from some of the clips that are in the trailers,
I
he's
didn't know it was
clearly
enemies to lovers, so that's fun.
it's yeah, it's a like there's some contention. I mean, I anybody who watches my movies knows that I love that where there's, the contention dialogue
Uh-huh.
is so fun.
Yeah.
When they're sort of zinging one another, and
Uh-huh.
Kim is so good at that and
Oh my
Ben
gosh.
is a great punching bag for some of these things. I think that audiences who expect a certain type of Hallmark romance might find some things here that that change their expectations a little bit of in terms of the chemistry and in terms of what they might expect from your male and female romantic lead. I think between the two of them, they're really really good. Supporting cast is great. Lucy Guest, a phenomenal director. This has just been a real joy to work on, and I really hope it gets the eyeballs it deserves.
Well, I'm super excited because I mean, we love Kimberly, of course, and she just
Yeah,
did a very swoony movie called The Real West that
sure.
was very good. We liked it a lot. And and it just sounds super fun. And
Yeah,
I was, talking to Paul about it. So that was fun to hear. Because I talked to him in like September and
yeah.
he tried to be like, oh, I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything.
Oh,
Like,
about Santa
sure,
Claus, you mean?
which was funny.
Oh, great.
But yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I had no
well,
idea. That's great.
yeah. So anyway, well, we're looking forward to it because we just like her so much. So very good. Well, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us. I'll be so curious what you have coming going forward, and congratulations on an amazing 2024. Incredible.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me as always. And again, hopefully in 2025 we'll be having a conversation again and talking about some more cool projects coming down the pipe. Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think we'll see you doing non-Christmas stuff, or are you focusing more on just Christmas?
I would love to. I've got some ideas.
Uh-huh.
Trying to make some things happen. Just none of them have happened yet. I do
Yeah.
have a couple of things. I'll say this. I don't know whether they're going to happen. Things can always get derailed. I've got some Christmas things planned for 2025 that I'm working on right now that I think are really special and strange and have some cool people involved.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't know what
Yeah.
I can say, but and
Cool.
also things can fall apart. I don't want to jinx anything,
Sure, sure.
but yeah, there's some very cool stuff coming in 2025 as well.
Yeah.
Hallmark is being really smart about keeping their sandbox of what
Sure.
a Christmas movie could be nice and wide, and I'm really really happy to be playing in it.
That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
congratulations. And if people want to follow you on like socials or things like that, how do they do that?
Yeah, Russell H Film everywhere on Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, wherever there's a thing, it's Russell H Film.
Okay, cool. I'd like to thank Russ for coming on the podcast. This was so much fun to get to talk with him. I just think he's so interesting, and I was just enjoy his thoughts about films and certainly his films. And I thought we had a great discussion. So let me know what you think, and I'll put the links down to the other 2 times that we had him on the podcast, and let us know what you think about the different movies that we talked about, and just about writing in general. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And please, if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. You can follow me at Rachel's Reviews all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes, and follow the podcast at Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast all over social media. And if you could check out our Patreon, we would sure be grateful. And that's a great way that you can get all kinds of perks and getting to be a part of watch alongs and patron events. And we have as many perks as we can think of. I really am constantly trying to make it better and make it worth your investment. And we sure appreciate that. And then we have the merch store where we have some really fun designs, including designs on Home Alone, It's a Wonderful Life, A Christmas Story. All of that's all in there. So please check it out. And thanks again to Russell. We'll talk to y'all later. Bye.